Am I in this time?
You are.
You are indeed.
Yay! We had technical difficulties at the last meeting.
A little.
We're just waiting on one or two others. We'll start in just a minute or so.
You all know how much I love technology.
Yes.
Yeah.
Morgan tells me we're good to go, so I will welcome you to the October 25th, 2021 Board of Aldermen meeting for the City of Town and Country and call this meeting to order. I'd ask everyone to join in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
Good evening. Before we start, before we do a roll call, I would just say, hey, I want everybody to kind of, fortunately, there were apparently no injuries, but I saw an awful lot of houses and businesses in this state that were flattened last night by those, I think, EF2 tornadoes. So, like I said, great blessing. There were no fatalities or even serious injuries, but let's keep those folks in your prayers. And now I would ask the city clerk to call the roll for attendance.
Alderman Allen,
Here.
Alderman Even,
Here.
Alderman Holman,
Here.
Alderman Hughes,
Here.
Alderman Mortland,
Here.
Alderman Weezahan,
Here.
and Alderman Whitmire.
Here.
I have Alderman Perot as absent, Mayor Reem is presiding, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to seek a motion to approve the October 11th meeting minutes and a second to approve.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
By Brian R. Pam, thank you. Any discussion or amendment? All in favor, say aye.
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 Assume there's none opposed. Okay. Thank you. Those are approved. What we're going to do next, just for a minute, for a few minutes, I hope, is I'm going to read a proclamation to thank the Mason Ridge Garden Club for many years, actually a couple decades of service. And then we're going to hear from their leader, Claire Choset. But I would like to read the proclamation first. It take a little while, but it's well-deserved and we don't want to rush through it. Whereas the dedicated, talented, and hardworking members of the Mason Ridge Garden Club had no idea what was in store for them 20 years ago when they agreed to address the overgrown gardens at what is now Longview Farm Park. Whereas in the growing season since then, through continued and cooperative work, the Mason Ridge Garden Club has transformed an underdeveloped and challenging condition into gardens so beautiful they often serve as the settings for portraits, parties, and weddings. Whereas the Mason Ridge Garden Club recently celebrated a remarkable 20 seasons of volunteer work, logging over 12,000 hours in the beautiful Longview Gardens, resulting in a priceless gift to the community of donated time and talents. And whereas the Mason Ridge Garden Club is composed of 11 master gardeners and many collective years of experience and expertise, Whereas, along with tending to the stunning gardens, the garden club also donates their time and talents to decorate the Longview farmhouse for the holidays by supplying greenery, pine roping, and wreaths to make Longview farmhouse festive and inviting. And whereas, along with trimming, mulching, planting, watering, and otherwise caring for the material in the gardens, the members of the Mason Ridge Garden Club hold a plant sale each year and a booth at the Holiday Boutique. And with those funds has provided over $20,000 worth of donations to local charities. And whereas the Mason Ridge Garden Club continues to make Longview Farm a showcase for all to enjoy season after season, year after year, and the city of Town and Country is extremely grateful for their dedication and accomplishments. Now, therefore, I, Charles Ream, Mayor of the City of Town and Country, Missouri, do hereby proclaim our appreciation of the Mason Ridge Garden Club. And I urge all of our residents to join me in acknowledging Mason Ridge Garden Club's 20-year anniversary of
Wow.
service to our community. Well done.
Well done. Congratulations.
And ahead of that is Claire Choset. And Claire, I would love for you to make a few comments if you would.
I only was allowed 3 minutes, and I love to talk. So I'm sure a lot of the aldermen, Barbara Hughes knows this because she's actually the one who asked us if we were interested in cleaning up the gardens at the park. Gosh, it was 20 and a half years ago. And I didn't really think that the girls would want to do it. It was in horrible, horrible shape. And they decided they would. And it took us 6 weeks just to clean off the back courtyard. In fact, the beautiful French doors that are there now, we didn't know they were there until I trimmed the hydrangeas around them. So it was amazing. And then it came to the point what was going to happen in the front, and the city didn't have any plans for it. I really think they were just going to plow under and turf it up. And I said, well, we can't allow that to happen. So we worked another, 4 or 5 months until the park opened. And since then, we start work beginning of March, and we work until middle of November, and we decorate the house for Christmas, and we take a 3-month break, and we come back and do it all again. And it's just been one of the pleasures of my life. It's the place is gorgeous. We've done a really commendable job, I think. And when we see brides, when we see people telling us that they're having their weddings there because of the gardens, and we see the high school seniors getting their pictures taken there, and it brings us immense joy, and we just adore the place. It's different every year, but I think there's no other place like it. I don't think there's any other volunteer group like us that logs 12,000 hours. And no matter what the weather, if anybody stops by, we were there last week in the rain because there was a wedding the next day.
Oh.
So we love it. There's an incredible amount of camaraderie with all the girls. And I think we've made it a real show place. And I wish any of you besides Barb could have seen what it looked like before we started, because it was horrid. It was just horrid. So I so appreciate you all doing this, and we just adore the project. And as long as our aging bodies hold out, I was 20 years younger when I started this. So anyway, hopefully we are here for another 20 years.
Thank you, Claire, and thank all of your
Thank you.
other gardeners for.
I will. Thank you all so much.
Fabulous.
It's been an amazing pleasure, and we feel that it gets better every year. And the people, everyone loves seeing it, and lots of people have memories of being out in those gardens.
It's things like that that kind of work and effort that actually make Town and Country such a special place. So again,
Well, and it's amazing because I'm not even a Town and Country resident.
well,
I actually live in Creve Coeur and do another project in the city of Creve Coeur for 12 years. But Longview was always, even 40 years ago, I drove by that house and said, man, I would love to be there someday. And now I've been here 20 years.
Thank you.
Thank you all. It's a wonderful project. And Charlie, thank you so much for the proclamation.
all right, take care.
Well
now.
deserved.
Thank you.
Have
Bye.
a great, bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.
And I would double check with the city clerk. I don't believe we have any other speakers or any other records to put in to the.
No,
pub-
sir. No one signed up and I have nothing for inclusion in the record for this section.
Thank you. Next, we have some public hearings. I'll read the first one. A public hearing to review a request from Andrew Walken, owner, for approval of a conditional use permit for an accessory structure, a pool house located at 12345 Harflow Lane in the Suburban Estate Zoning District. I now declare the public hearing open and would ask the city clerk to enter exhibits.
Exhibit number 1 is affidavit of publication of notice of hearing, published in the St. Louis County on October 8th, 2021. Exhibit number 2 is typewritten notice of hearing, posted at the municipal center and on the subject property, and mailed to property owners within 300 feet of that property with a list of those owners attached. And exhibit number 3 is bill number 2149.
Thank you. And Tony Camacho, an owner's representative, will be present to answer questions. And actually, for Mr. Camacho, I have one question for you.
Yes.
When I read through it, the square footage is 443, and I think our limit is 300, and the height was 19, and our limit is 15. And I understand, I think some of the property actually backs up to our nursery and is not an issue, but do you know if the owners have talked to the neighbors and are they good with it? I was just kind of curious as to if there've been any input from the neighbors relative to the structure.
Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? I can't turn my video back on and I'm scrambling. Sorry about that. What was your question again?
Okay.
The audio was low at my end.
Certainly. The pavilion, the pool house is slated, it says, to be 443 square feet. 300 is our limit, and the height
Yes.
about 4 feet higher. And I said
Right.
that I believe that part of the property abuts a nursery, and I don't think it would bother them.
Well, I think the excuse me, sorry to interrupt you, but the nursery is across the street.
Okay, sorry. I
Yes,
just
yes.
was curious if the owners had talked to the neighbors at all.
Yes.
And was there
They
buy-in
have-
from neighbors?
Yeah, they've really attempted to do that. And it seems like they don't really have a structured representation there, and they're trying to reorganize it, reassemble it, because really what I get from all the input is that there was one person that was really leading this disorganized sort of group, and he sold his house and left town, and everybody was kind of left to themselves to try to formulate it. And the homeowner, Andrew, really reached out and tried to notify everyone, and he really couldn't assemble anything formally for the board here.
But as far as you know, there's not any.
Oh,
outright
no,
position.
no, absolutely not. He could even, if we needed to, we could even maybe get something in writing from the person that was mainly the person in charge of collecting input, could testify to the fact that he said, you know, he has no problem with what he's proposing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's such a small structure in the context of such a large lot. Yeah, the rear yard is extremely long in depth. Yeah.
And then I would open it up to members of the Board of Aldermen for any questions they might have. And I would ask the city clerk if there are any public comments.
No, sir, none were submitted for this hearing.
Then I would declare the public hearing closed.
I have a question.
Sure.
I have a question. Now, the next procedural step is there's another public hearing, a second. Is this a closed matter after this? Or is there another procedure?
I'm going to let Mr. Shelter, actually, Ms. McNamara answer that specifically. So I
Okay,
won't mess it up.
thank you.
Mr. Camacho, what will happen is this is the formal public hearing. It was just closed. So later on in the agenda, agenda item 4 will be the first reading of this ordinance that will approve the conditional use permit. It will be automatically continued to the board's next meeting on 11/8. Then
Okay.
11/8, they will formally take it up. So on 11/8, you'll know if it's approved, denied, or continued further.
Oh, I see. This board approves it to be on the agenda to approach it to the board that will approve it or not approve it.
Well,
This is the
it's
first
same-
step of them taking it up formally.
Okay,
Right.
okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you, Ashley. All right, the next one is a public hearing to review a request from Grant Dino, owner, for approval of a conditional use permit for an accessory structure, a permanent outdoor game court located at 18 Brookwood Road in the Estate Zoning District. I now declare the public hearing open and would ask the city clerk to enter exhibits.
Exhibit number 1 is affidavit of publication of notice of hearing, published in the St. Louis Countian on October 8th, 2021. Exhibit number 2 is typewritten notice of hearing, posted at the municipal center on the subject property, mailed to property owners within 300 feet of that property, and a list of all the property owners attached. Exhibit number 3 is bill number 2150.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Dino is present to answer questions, and I would ask if any of the members of the Board of Aldermen have any question of the applicant or any other discussion.
Mayor, if I could just note for the record, I don't see Mr. Dino on, but I do see Paul, who I believe is Paul Mertz with Pullman and Prost. If Paul, if you could just confirm that so I can note it for the record.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no comments, does the city clerk, are there any public comments?
No, sir, none were received for this item either.
I now declare this public hearing closed. The third public hearing is a public hearing to review a request from Jackie and Richard Dillport, owners, for approval of a conditional use permit for an accessory structure, a pavilion located at 13513 Kings Glen Drive in the Suburban Estate Zoning District. I declare the public hearing open and would ask the city clerk to enter exhibits.
Exhibit number 1 is affidavit of publication of notice of hearing, published in the St. Louis Countian on October 8th, 2021. Exhibit number 2 is typewritten notice of hearing, posted at the municipal center and on the subject property, and mailed to property owners within 300 feet of subject property with a list of those owners attached. And exhibit number 3 is bill number 2151.
Thank you. And Mrs. Dillport, the owner, is present to answer questions. I would just comment, when I read through the material, that there were a host of her neighbors who had signed off stating that they had no issues with the development of the pavilion. So I don't have any other questions. And then I would ask if any members of the Board of Aldermen have any questions or discussion. Alderman Even.
I just wanted to state that this went before the Architectural Review Board and it was approved unanimously.
Thank you for that input. And also then, is there any other public comments from the city clerk? Has anybody else entered any comments that we're not aware of?
No, sir, none were submitted.
And I would declare this public hearing closed. Thank you. At this point, I'd recognize the board's opportunity to provide any reports from their commissions. Alderman Whitmire.
Thank you, Mayor. So the Planning and Zoning Commission met on the 20th, and we asked them to consider a couple of things. One was staff had come forward with a change to the gate code to extend the distance from the street from 25 to 30 feet. That was approved unanimously by the Planning and Zoning Commission. It'll come forward to this body in the near future. At the same time, at a later date, they're going to take a broader look at our code around gates, and given some of the conversations that have occurred in meetings at P&Z and then also here, to see if they need to be freshened up or if they're fine the way they are. And then lastly, they had formed a subcommittee or a work group, forgive me, I can't remember what the official title is, but a subset of the committee to take a look at coming up with some code to support the regulation of storage units on individual properties. And sometimes folks refer to pods, which I think is a brand name, but you know what I'm talking about when I say it.
Right.
So they're going to take a look at that and maybe come back with some ideas there. We'll see. That's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. The Ways and Means Commission meeting will meet next week, Wednesday, November 3rd, 8:30, in person at the Municipal Center. Ms. Jadali this afternoon or this evening just emailed you, Mayor, and the board draft 22 budget spreadsheets, draft budget request overview in a narrative form, and town and country revenues and expenses. So the Ways and Means will be looking further, but you all have access to that information currently. Also, the Veterans First Responders Task Force followed up last week. The RFQ for this project will be out by the end of this week. I am meeting with Ms. Nixon when she gets back on Wednesday. Our next meeting will be December 6th, which will be a few days after the RFQ deadline, which will be December 1st. And then we will meet following that meeting. And I hope by next meeting, which again is the 8th, I will share any further information with the board. Thank you.
Thank you for that update. Alderman Weezahan.
Thank you, Mayor. The Parks and Trails Commission met last Monday night. Wanted to first start off and let everyone know that the city was awarded the grant for the Drace Playground project, $416,686. So that was good news that we heard. We had a lot of good discussion about the contracts will be coming up tonight. And then also we had a good discussion about getting the events organized now that we're going to be overseeing some of the events that and areas that other commissions have had purview in the past. We're going to start hopefully having some sort of a more detailed events outline along with the budget, just to list what the expectations are for the events, the expected, not only the expenses, but the revenues, as well as listing out the volunteers, the police needed, et cetera, just to help keep things organized and streamlined moving forward.
Thank you. Alderman Holman.
Thank you, Mayor. The Public Works Commission met this month, and we will meet again in November. We hope to complete our synopsis and report to the Board of Aldermen regarding management partners audits. And we also reviewed contracts for the 2022 budget, and those contracts will be presented to the board tonight under first reading. And we re-reviewed the custodial and the grounds care contract that will be up for second reading tonight. And we are not recommending any change to those two contracts this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Shelton, I believe you do not have a report.
No report.
Great, okay. Then on to unfinished business, bill number 21-46. I think it's being sponsored as a board as a whole. Without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the second time?
Bill number 2146 is an ordinance accepting the bid of St. Louis Select Landscaping for the 2022 grounds care program and authorizing an agreement for same.
Thank you. I would need a motion to approve and a second.
So moved.
By Ms. Holman and by Ms. Allen. And before we get into general discussion, which I'm happy to have, I would ask Alderman Holman again to talk to me a little bit about how this went when it went through Public Works, when it went through your commission there.
Sure. So the board at our previous Board of Aldermen meeting continued this contract and to look at, my takeaway was to look at the service, consider the fact that we were recommending approval of a contract before our 2022 budget was approved, and also level of service. So when we brought the discussion forward, what came forward from the commissioners is, one, if there's recommended to change policy and procedure, how we look at contracts prior to an approved budget, that's really a Board of Aldermen conversation, and they did not have a recommendation for changing that policy or procedure and how it impacts our budget. And then we broke down the contract and looked at the service that the vendor will provide in 2022. And we looked to see if there's any areas or categories that we could pull back. And a lot of this is just grounds care maintenance. And we break down the city into sectors. Our main thoroughfare, we hit about 24 times during the season. Our other areas, for example, the 6440 corridor, we hit about 14 times through a season. And we really didn't find areas where we could pull back. Because we do have an ordinance with requirements on how high our grass can be and taking care of our landscaping around the community. Other things that came up is that this contract does come out of the road fund and the storm fund. It does not come out of our general fund, and our road and storm are restricted funds, so we can only spend those dollars on those items. So there wasn't a concern for our general fund or our reserves because the dollars don't impact that fund. And then lastly, we looked at the amount of vendors that came forward to bid on this service for our community, and there were only 2. And we took our standardized route where we advertised in the custodian, we put it in City Hall, a mailer, and we put it on our website. And because we had so few vendors coming forward, our staff started reaching out to vendors in the community. And in this category of business, anyone that has service to their private property probably has felt the impact of COVID-19 when it comes to landscape care and groundskeeping on their own property. I think the industry has been hit hard. I think there's a loss of employees in this type of service, and we only got 2 bids. And we weren't willing to recommend pulling back on the service or rebidding this service. So we have no change to this contract as it's presented to the board tonight.
Thank you. I had that feeling when I read through the minutes, but I wanted to kind of hear it directly. I appreciate that. But now I'd just like to open it up, obviously, to the rest of the board for any comments or thoughts or discussion. Alderman Weezahan.
Thank you, Mark. we had a discussion last week as well regarding grounds care and this contract at Parks and Trails. And the commission also decided unanimously to move forward with this contract and felt that it was appropriate. We had reviewed the 22 budget as well for the Parks and Stormwater Fund. And it was also mentioned that what's budgeted this year is significantly lower than what was actually spent in this year coming up in 22 is significantly less than what was actually spent in 2019. So that was a topic of discussion as well as in regard to grounds care.
Thank you. Any other comments? Alderman Whitmire.
So we're approving a contract for services before we have budget approval. So will we actually sign this contract, execute the contract and send it back to the vendor if it's approved tonight?
Yes.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
yes, that has typically been our practice.
And just to follow up, then I do feel very uncomfortable approving a contract for a matter for which we have not approved a budget. I mean, that's backwards.
Mayor, if I could,
Please.
Alderman Whitmire, my concern would be the budget schedule contemplates, if everything goes well, a December 13th budget approval. And I don't know that we give ample time to a contractor for this scope of work to have everything in place that our specific bid documents require with the E-Verify, the insurance, and all the contract work that has to go into place prior to work in.
And I feel to a degree, in a sense, from the fact that we only had 2 bids, we kind of need them a little more than they need us. And I do believe that this was a competitive bid. We took the lowest of the 2. And I think it's pretty much in line with what we have done before in the past in terms of that kind of an expenditure. If I'm not, after, because I haven't been here that long, I have to defer to Mr. Shelton, but I think that's about in line with what we've done in the past.
It is, definitely.
And if on all these contracts, and I would defer to you, Mr. Shelton, Mr. Garrett, if we get into a middle of a contract, like a service contract like this, and for whatever reason, their service is poor, we run out of money, whatever the reason, I would assume in these contracts, there's a way to exit the contract prematurely if we deem that to be the right way to go.
Mayor, that's correct, but I would also point out that the contract's going to be subject to an annual appropriation, which we don't have yet because the budget is what appropriates the funds. So if we entered into the contract and we didn't appropriate the funds, then the contract would not be effective because there wasn't an annual appropriation to fund it. And that's generally the law with respect to appropriations. Everything that you do is subject to an annual appropriation. That's the way cities operate.
Okay, I got it.
So I understand Alderman Whitmire's concern, but I'm not concerned about it because of the law relative to the appropriation. It requires that we appropriate the money to do it. If we can't or don't, then
it's not basically.
Yes, I believe that's the case. Yes, the contractor may not, but I believe that is clearly the law.
Okay. Alderman Mortland.
So just a quick comment. I think we keep coming up ahead of this, and I know we started the budget process earlier this year, which is great. So looking forward to next year, how can we line this up to solve this problem long term? So we're looking at it, and I know it's sometimes harder to see revenues and some of those things, but if we're going to start, trying to approve these service contracts in October, November, prior to the budget being finalized in December, if we can just look at that, that's just more a comment. That's it. I know we're working the right direction this year, so we continue to do that.
Alderman Morton, I think that makes sense, but I would talk with Mr. Shelton and Mr. Dolly, because I think there's a certain limit to how far up you can move that budget before you know revenues and other issues. So I'm not sure the stars can completely align as much as we'd like in that regard, but I will defer to our city manager and CFO on that. And well, Alderman Mortland, let me let you finish. Go ahead.
But so just, and I agree with, I understand that. So I guess the question would be is, if we can't get it, how do we align up our bids and talking to the potential vendors to give them the time they need on the other side? So it kind of lines up to work that way.
Alderman Holman.
So I'm wondering so for most of these contracts are coming out of the Public Works Department. They are opened up around week 2, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, around week 2 of October 13th is I think when a lot of them were opened. And so would it help the vendor help us to put a 60-day clause, because then that brings us to December on, you'll hear our response back within 60 days, and then our budget is approved. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but you know, most bids have a timeline. Sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's 60, sometimes it's 90. So if the vendor could understand that we would be approving week 2 of December, I don't know, that'd be a conversation we could have.
And it may not be an issue at all, but in this day and age of having enough of a workforce for multiple companies to get something done, I worry that if we don't commit to something in a certain time frame, the vendor may say, hey, we weren't sure about you guys. We don't have enough workforce. We can't get this done. Your city's going to look a little rough. I'm a little bit hesitant to wait till the 9th inning, so to speak, to make sure we finish these contracts.
Well, you know what the flip side is?
Yeah.
Speed up when we approve our budget in the end of third quarter.
And I think we'll look at that. But from watching how diligently our folks put the budget together, I want to be pretty careful of not overcommitting them to things that are just unrealistic. So I think we have to have a pretty hard discussion on that. I'm not saying that can't be done, but I need a lot more education in the background about how doable that is.
Right. And just one last comment, Mayor. So with this company, St. Louis Select, they've worked in our municipality previous years, and our current vendor. But what I'll say is we did pull back service this year, and our vendor did work with us, and they understood that we were going through a pandemic and they were short on help, and we shut down businesses. So we have a good relationship with this company that we're bringing on for 2022. And I know it's not in writing, but I'm confident they would work with us if businesses should shut down or something else comes up.
I appreciate that. And I do think it's important that we maintain these good relationships with these companies. We make sure we get the services that our citizens kind of demand and expect, frankly.
Yeah.
I would ask, I'm sorry. Alderman Even, please.
Is there a way, I know Mr. Garrett said that it is the law that we have to appropriate funds, but is there a way to add that into this contract that we have for 2022? That provided the funds are appropriated through budget, which will be voted on in whatever month? Because otherwise it's, you're going based on a contract that you're signing with the company that's different than what the law is. And if we just make it clear cut, then for this year, we're covered and both parties know exactly what's going on.
Sometimes cities do put that in the contract. That can be done. I'm not sure that I don't believe that the party that we're contracting with would have a problem with that. I wouldn't think anyway.
Then if that's the case, I certainly could support that.
So do I need to make a motion?
Could we, either it has to be a formal motion, or we could do that if Mr. Garrett thinks it's possible to do that informally in our negotiations, or if we need a formal motion. I'm good.
Well,
either.
if we're going to approve the contract, we probably ought to,
Insert it.
yes, to have a motion to amend, to revise the contract to include that language.
Ms. McNamara.
If we have some language that the city attorney can come up with, that's one thing. If not, we might want to continue it so that he can look to see where to put it in. But I also just want to point out that for this contract in particular, there's language in there about the term being January 1 of 2022 to December 31 of 22. So if there happened to be a problem with budget, it could probably come back before you guys for some kind of amended agreement as well. I don't know which one's messier, but just if there's going to be language inserted, I just want to make sure we're super careful about where it's going to go and specifically call that out.
Thank you. Alderman Even.
So yes, the contract states a specific date, but then when do we sign it and send it over to them? Because essentially, wouldn't that contract become effective the date that we sign it and submit it to the vendor? Even if the start date's not till January, we're agreeing to the contract that we've signed versus being able to make amendments to it after we've signed it.
Correct. If it's approved and then it's executed, then the contract obviously becomes enforceable. Again, I'm not that concerned about the annual appropriation, but it's simple enough just to add language that this contract is subject to the city attorney appropriating the money in its 2022 budget.
I mean, for the purpose, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
For the purpose of trying to get things right, if we are as a board working towards putting the horse before the cart and making sure that we're following guidelines that make sense, you know, maybe we might change things for next year, but by adding simple language, it at least is allowing us to get this contract agreed upon and give the vendor some peace of mind that we are moving forward and not having to continue this again.
Well, I would say that if we decide to go that way, I would feel more comfortable if we put it off to the next meeting and make sure that legal had a way to make sure the wording was appropriate, as opposed to thinking of something off the top of our head right now. Alderman Hughes.
As I'm listening to comments, I think they're very valid. And so I'm going to move to continue to the next meeting.
Do I have a second for that motion? Alderman
I'll
Eden
second.
seconds that.
Okay.
I am going to ask the city clerk, do we need a roll call vote for that amendment?
You can do it as a voice vote, but I'll just note for the record that that meeting date is November 8th, the continuance. And then you can absolutely do it as a voice vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to double check then. As far as we're concerned, Bill 2146 is continued to our next meeting in November. Is that correct? Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Number 2, Bill number 21-47. Also sponsored the board as a whole. Without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the second time?
Bill number 2147 is an ordinance accepting the bid of Corvus Janitorial Services for 2022 custodial services at city-owned buildings and parks, and authorizing a maintenance agreement for same.
Thank you. I would seek a motion to approve and a second.
So moved.
Alderman Holman, second by, I think, Alderman Weezahan. Thank you. And I think this has been through, if I believe, Parks and Trails and Public Works both, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any discussion and amendment on this bill? Alderman Weezahan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So we did discuss it last week at Parks and Trails. There's a lot of good conversation. Some of the topics that got brought up were that the commission really felt that it was important to make sure that the brand of Town and Country was met. We have very clean facilities. They are kept up very well. They felt strongly about this proposal, this bid. However, they also understand the financial responsibility and the fiscal responsibility that we have. And so while they support it, they understand if there are changes that need to be made, discussed some different options, discussed having the consistency between the bathrooms being cleaned at different times of the year. So it was a good conversation. Ultimately, it was unanimously approved through the commission, but a lot of good discussion.
Thank you. And Alderman Holman.
Thank you, Mayor. The Public Works Commission discussed this contract as well, and there were three other vendors that came forward, and one actually withdrew putting in a bid. This was our lowest bid, and they've provided service in our community for several years. We had similar comments as Parks and Trails, but one point that was brought up during our Public Works Commission meeting is that we are still living through a pandemic, and it hasn't been decreased to an endemic or epidemic. And to pull back any type of cleaning services in our community is not something we as a commission are looking to do.
Thank you. And open it to further discussion. Alderman Neven.
So I've looked through this. I've talked about it with Miss Nixon, and I guess I have some questions as to the inconsistency. I appreciate Alderman Holman's commission and saying that they do not want to cut back on cleaning services due to the pandemic that we're still living in. But I guess I'm trying to understand why we have Town Square being cleaned at a higher rate than Longview Farm Park or some of the other parks that have higher usage based on what Ms. Nixon has told us. So, in my opinion, I feel like we need to be consistent among all of our parks. And if there's a concern about the usage of those, then maybe we need to consider doing, some sort of evaluation of how many people roughly are using it, so we can determine if we need 7 days a week at Town Square versus 5 days a week at all of the other parks and pavilions. I know Ms. Nixon's staff states that they do go over there and check on those restrooms and pavilions on a daily basis. But I don't understand the inconsistency amongst Town Square versus the other parks when I'm being told that the other parks, especially Longview, gets more usage than Town Square restrooms.
I'm not sure I know at the top of my head, Mr. Shelton, how many restrooms are there at Longview versus at Town Square?
So that is one difference. Town Square does have the two restrooms, one at the pavilion, and then the other one up at the service facility at the end of the tunnel. I did some just rough calculations. It does look like even though there are two separate restrooms at Town Square, we anticipate with the commercial businesses becoming more robust, and there has been good activity year-round at Town Square, that they will be used. Also, so I looked at just roughly, I think we're paying $1,500 more at Town Square, additional restrooms, additional cleaning. So it does seem to be a very, very competitive bid for those additional cleanings and additional restrooms.
I would just comment myself, and then I'll get to you, Alderman, even that there's something about going in a restroom that's not clean is not particularly appealing. And that perhaps what we need to look at maybe up the number of cleanings at Longview from 5 days to 7 days. I would think I'd rather lean toward a little bit of upping what we're doing there than cutting back elsewhere, because I think it says a lot about your community. I mean, when I go to a store and if I happen to use the restroom and it looks horrible, I'm probably not coming back there again. So like I said, if anything, maybe we should look at increasing the cleaning we do at Longview to 7 days from the 5 that we're doing. Alderman Even, didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. So do our bathroom locks have timers on them where they shut at a certain time?
They do. I don't know the exact time, but they are, yeah, they're on timers.
Okay. Do you know if we've had complaints about our restrooms being dirty or not serviced?
Well, no, because the city staff regularly checks them, as do our cleaning people. Again, town square is new. We want to keep it looking good.
Sure.
We want to keep all our restaurants looking
Sure.
good.
No, I agree with that. I guess I'm just trying to understand the differences. If we don't have an issue with them being clean because our city staff is doing so, and we have janitorial services, then it was our goal to increase our janitorial service and cut back on the amount of time that city staff is having to go through. I just feel like we need some consistency amongst this, and I would welcome kind of a spot count to try to see where are we at during the busy season and where are we at during the off season to justify these numbers. Because what I'm told is the reason why we're doing 7 days a week is because of a stigma, and we want to make sure that town square is being kept clean. And I don't want any inconsistency. In my opinion, I don't think we need any inconsistency amongst the parks. If our goal is to have clean restrooms, then all of our restrooms are equally important, not just the one at town square because of a stigma. And that's what's being told.
Yeah, I wasn't, that's news to me about the stigma thing. But I mean, I know we have the audit, but I was not aware that that was the reason for the increased cleaning, frankly. But my feeling would be I'd lean toward going to 7 days a week at the other one, just to kind of even them up. Alderman Weezahan.
And that was adding additional service was discussed, kind of to that topic of consistency. Either it was discussed either having the bathrooms locked if they were not able to match, but it was to kind of echo what Alderman Holman had said. Keeping them clean, keeping things off the floor. Obviously, our staff is going through as well. But to make sure that it was consistent among all the bathrooms.
And I don't, this bill aside, I don't mind spending a little bit of extra time talking with parks and folks and actually maybe checking some of them myself and walking through these. And if we need to make an adjustment to what we're doing in terms of increasing it at Longview Farm Park, I'm all for it. We'll take a look at that. Having said that, any other discussion on this particular bill? Alderman Whitmire.
For the same reason we continued the prior bill, I would move that we continue this bill to insert similar language that we had talked about.
Second.
Before I do a voice, I would say, is it conceivable at all that we wouldn't have a janitorial contract, that we would go to budget and say, we're not gonna clean the bathrooms? I personally think, we can see if this passes, but I would think we need to go ahead with this, frankly, at this point, because I don't think we're going to not fund a janitorial service. Go ahead, Alderman Whitmire.
I fully agree. We need to have a janitorial service.
Yes.
I think, though, that as we had said before, we wanted to be square with our vendors that this contract is subject to the appropriation that will occur through the budget process. That's the only thought.
Reasonable enough. Alderman Even.
In addition to that, I would move to amend the agreement so that we can decide the frequency of what we are going to do for each of the bathrooms and pavilions. So
You think we know it better than the park staff knows it?
no, I don't believe that we know better than the park, but I feel that what would be the reason for cleaning town square if Longview Farm is our busiest park? And Drace Park comes in second as being our busiest park.
I think that's a reasonable question. And again, I think part of it is probably looking forward to the increased activity that's anticipated at Town Square, but I don't want any one park to feel slighted. If we need to be consistent and have the exact same number of bathroom cleanings at every single one of the parks, let's do it. And but so I will have Mr. Whitmire's motion has had a second. So and before we vote on it, Alderman Mortland.
I just want to note for the cause, it's not for the park. People are using the Clayton Trail, use that bathroom on a regular basis. I drove by there at 5:30 this morning. There was 4 cars parked out. Guys were getting out to run. They're going in to use the bathroom. Those bathrooms right by the tunnel are used on a regular basis. So it is helping our citizens and the people who hit the trail too. It might not be for the event, and I know Longview has a ton, but I do see a lot of people use those off and on as a meeting center for the Clayton Trail.
No, that's a good point.
Thank you. Well, I would
Can I ask one question of our city administrator or Michael?
surely.
My question is, so Corvus is servicing our facilities currently, correct, Bob?
Correct.
Okay. Are we in jeopardy in any way, shape, or form if we would continue this to have consistency in language? If we continue it to November 8th? Do you have any indication?
We have not inquired with them. To Alderman Evans' question, I would say they have shown flexibility in the past if we need to make some adjustments in what restrooms and when they're being cleaned. We need a standard bid document. The staff starts working on these in April to fine tune them, to really look at what goes into this. A lot of work goes into this, and I applaud the staff for the amount of time they spend to have good, solid bid specifications. And so we do have flexibility with these vendors if we need to adjust the restrooms based on use.
And the continuance piece of it to the 8th?
I can't speak to that. I can't speak to the
but
vendor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I certainly wouldn't want to lose this and have to rebid it.
I agree. Alderman Even.
Is there a time frame that this bid is good until?
They did not set a specific date in their bid document of how long they're good for. No, they didn't give us 60 days, 90 days, something like that.
Okay. And you stated that they are flexible with the cleaning. So then if we see that we do not need to increase our services and we want to cut back, does that change what we're going to be then paying them?
Right. No, I apologize if I was, Mayor, if I may, I apologize if adjusting their schedule, not their scope and not their price that they bid. I apologize if we need them to adjust where they're working, they've been flexible. I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've had this bill since July, or this bid since roughly mid-July, correct? That's what I'm looking at here. But they haven't said that they're going to retract this bid at any point in time after a certain date.
Not that I'm aware of.
Alderman Mortland.
So as a previous chair of the Public Works, that they have to prepare these, months out to kind of get them going. And I wholeheartedly concur that we need to get the budget kind of there. So from the vendor standpoint, they're doing what we're telling them to do at this point, from a kind of process standpoint.
I agree. I just wonder how much they need, how much they really need us. And I think we need to be a little bit cognizant of that. Alderman Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. I think a lot of good points have been made. Since it's October the 25th, this is probably not going to be the most busy time of bathroom usage, even though I know that people will still be using them. But we're bidding what we currently have, correct? The 5 days
Right,
at
right.
Longview, the 7. I wonder what would be a problem with going ahead, approving this contract, looking more closely. So say 1st of March, if we needed to redo it, re-look at the frequencies, couldn't we do that?
I would think the vendor being flexible, if we said, hey, okay, we approved it, this is the X number of dollars, but we need to, yeah, maybe we don't need the restrooms at Town Square, one set of them as often as the other set, and a couple more days a week at Longview Farm Park. I mean, I think any of those things they'd be willing to do.
Just take it all.
And, you know, as far as the what Mr. Garrett said about paying statute, laws, ordinances becoming effective, I think it is I certainly know at the state level, laws are passed and they're always subject to appropriation, and that is understood. It's always nice to have things in writing, but I know that's the way it's done in other public venues.
Can I just have clarity on that? Is the language added to our contract a peace of mind for us, and what you're appeasing the board because the law already exists, or do we have more power behind it if it's in writing in the contract?
Garrett?
That's to you, Mr. Garrett.
I think that's the law, but I think that if it's in the contract, that's, you know, there's nothing that they could argue that they somehow didn't know. I mean, I think that, you know, their ignorance of the law is no excuse. I think if we did it, we'd be doing it so that they understood that it's subject to the appropriation. They may not know that. I don't know. If they've been a vendor for a long time and they've done a lot of work for governments, they probably should know that, but I don't know what they know.
Okay, in your professional opinion, do you believe this clause or whatever you want to call it should be added to all of our contracts going forward?
I don't, again, I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be. And in some of the contracts, it is in there, as I recall. I don't think it's absolutely positively necessary to do that. It's, you know, I think it shows the vendors that we deal with, you know, it reminds them of what the law is. Obviously, this is something that very seldom does it affect contracts, but it's something that is a good reminder for them to understand if they don't already know. But it's still the law.
I know we're somewhere in this vote, but I would say my opinion that I want to share with the board is then if that's the case, we add it to these 2 live contracts. So we continue this out, and all of these other contracts that are on first read for this on-call service, we get that, we amend all those for our second read for the our next meeting. And we just add it to all contracts going forward.
I mean, it just most sense. It'll just save us a lot of aggravation.
Ditto,
Right.
ditto to her comments. Absolutely. Be
Mr. Shaw.
consistent.
Mayor, if I could, just so we're clear, I think what we're asking Mr. Garrett is just to add one section that simply states, in accordance with state law, this contract is subject to annual appropriation.
Something to that effect, yes.
Thank you.
If it's as simple as that, I'm happy to amend it right now on the floor tonight.
All right.
Ashley? Or would you prefer an extension and to get it in the correct spot?
I would need to pull the ordinance or have you decide which section it goes in.
Yeah.
So if there's no big hubbub, I would rather have delineated language that we know that it's gonna go in there and that we kick it back to the vendor, because changing contracts after they have
Yeah.
provided us the contract, I'd rather let
Yeah.
them see it too.
So I think we stand, Alderman Even. You're muted.
I
Go
would
ahead.
say then I make a motion to continue this to the
Mm.
next meeting to
Okay.
add the language of appropriation.
Either Alderman Hughes and Allen are seconding, and I would say all in favor.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay. Next, bill number 2148, sponsored by Alderman Mortland. Without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the second time?
Bill number 2148 is an ordinance authorizing the city administrator of Town and Country to enter into a Show Me Zero program agreement with the State of Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission for reimbursement of applicable equipment expenses associated with hazardous moving vehicle, occupant protection, and speed enforcement activities.
Thank you. I seek a motion to approve.
So moved.
And second from Alderman Weezahan. Any discussion or amendment? Would ask the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Alderman Mortland,
Aye.
Alderman Hughes,
Hughes, I'm sorry. Aye.
thank you. Alderman Whitmire,
Aye.
thank you. Alderman Weezahan,
Aye.
Alderman Even,
Aye.
Alderman Allen,
Aye.
and Alderman Holman.
Aye.
The bill passes unanimously and becomes ordinance number 4459.
Thank you. Before we move on, I do think we need to extend a thanks to Sergeant Chris Moore for his initiative, diligence, and hard work, which led to the police department being awarded this grant. Grant writing is not like a fun thing to do. If anybody's ever been involved in that, it's not fun.
Yes.
And so Sergeant Ward deserves our gratitude for saving the city dollars while obtaining equipment that we all request to use. So I just wanted to, Chief Cavens wanted to be sure that we recognize Sergeant Chris Moore, and I think that's very appropriate. So I want to make sure that we're on record with that.
Thank
Here,
you.
here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, new business. This is bill number 2149. I need a sponsor for the bill, probably Alderman Holman and Hughes. And
Yeah.
Yes.
without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2149 is an ordinance approving a conditional use and authorizing a conditional use permit for an accessory structure, a pool house located at 12345 Harflow Lane in the city of Town and Country.
That's the first reading. So bill number 2149 is continued to the meeting of Monday, November 8, 2021 for the second reading and final consideration. Bill number 2150, seeking the sponsors, probably Alderman Weezahan and Even. Thank you. And without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2150 is an ordinance approving a conditional use and authorizing a conditional use permit for an accessory structure, a permanent outdoor game court located at 18 Brookwood Road in the city of Town and Country.
Thank you. Bill number 2150 is continued to the meeting of Monday, November 8th, 2021 for the second reading and final consideration. Bill number 2151, seeking the sponsors, probably Alderman Weezahan and Even. Thank you. Thank you. And without objection, will the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2151 is an ordinance approving a conditional use and authorizing a conditional use permit for an accessory structure, a pavilion, located at 13513 Kings Glen Drive in the city of Town and Country.
Thank you. Bill number 2151 is continued to the meeting of Monday, November 8th, 2021 for the second reading and final consideration. Thank you. Bill number 2152, perhaps sponsored by the board as a whole. Without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
And just for the record, I will check with Alderman Perot to be sure that he's okay with that board as a whole sponsorship. If not, I'll note that on the bill.
Thank
Bill
you.
number 2152 is an ordinance amending Title I, Chapter 105, Elections of the Municipal Code of the City of Town and Country regarding candidacy filing.
Thank you. Bill number 2152 is continued to the meeting of Monday, November 8th, 2021 for the second reading and final consideration. Bill number 21-53, I seek a sponsor for the bill. I'm thinking Alderman Holman, thank you. And without objection, will the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2153 is an ordinance accepting the bid and authorizing an agreement with T Hill Construction for the 2022 on-call roadway maintenance program.
Thank you. Bill number 2153 is continued to the meeting of Monday, November 8th, 2021 for the second reading and consideration. Bill number 2154, also sponsored by Alderman Holman. And without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2154 is an ordinance accepting the bid and authorizing an agreement with Gershner Electric, Inc. for 2022 traffic signal maintenance and repair.
Thank you. Bill number 2154 is continued to the meeting of Monday, November 8th, 2021 for the second reading and consideration. Bill number 2155, also I believe sponsored by Alderman Holman. Thank you. And without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2155 is an ordinance authorizing a professional services agreement with HR Green, Inc. for 2022 on-call engineering services.
Bill number 2155 is continued to the meeting of Monday, November 8, 2021 for the second reading and consideration. Bill number 2156, also by Alderman Holman. Thank you. Without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2156 is an ordinance accepting the bid and authorizing an agreement with Gamma Tree Experts for 2022 on-call tree trimming and removal services.
Thank you. Bill number 2156 is continued to the meeting of Monday, November 8th, 2021 for the second reading and consideration. Bill number 2157, a sponsor, Alderman Holman. Thank you. Without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
I'll sponsor it as well.
Thank you, Alderman Hughes.
Bill number 2157 is an ordinance accepting the bid of St. Louis Select Landscaping for landscaping work on the Topping Road resurfacing and pedestrian improvements project and authorizing an agreement for same.
Thank you.
Bill number 2157 is continued to the meeting Monday, November 8, 2021 for the second reading and consideration. Number 13, approval of a purchase order to St. Louis Select Landscaping for 824 Greenwich Green Stormwater Maintenance Project in the amount of $6,966.13. I seek a motion and a second to approve.
So moved.
By Alderman Weezahan, second by Alderman Mortland. Any discussion or amendment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. Number 14, the warrant list. The warrant list is the amount of $115,359.73. Seek a motion to approve in a second.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Okay.
Second.
Second by Alderman Mortland. Any discussion or amendment? Alderman Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. On our first page, the vendor Another wild goose chase. I believe last time, 2 weeks ago, we had a payment to them. And we were told at that point that would probably be the end of our contract with them. But I see this invoice was from February, and I'm wondering how we get in October still invoices from February. And it just doesn't seem like good business one way or the other. Could someone comment? I don't believe Ms. Smithson is around, but Mr. Shelton?
Yes, they were late invoicing us for that month's service.
Really late.
No problem. Alderman Holman.
Is this, will this be in theory our last invoice with them? Did you say that at the previous meeting that we were?
As far as I'm aware.
Yes.
And because what I will point out is this is the second time where we have received an invoice many months
Correct.
later, like
Correct.
many. So I would almost pull up all those invoices and look at them numerically to make sure it's lining up appropriately. It's funny.
It is.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. I don't have any other comments of my own, but I open it to the floor for anyone else who has business to bring before the board. Alderman Holman.
I just wanted to circle back to the grounds care conversation just for one moment and call out the obvious on our, and not speak to detail about our new business, but you'll see that several of the ordinances at our next meeting are all with St. Louis Select Landscaping, as is our service for 2022, in theory, if we approve it. And so this industry has been hit hard. So I'm happy that we settled on adding the language to the contract, but not putting ourselves in jeopardy of having to go back out and rebid it, because I don't know where we would land. But when we meet again, they are the only vendor that came forward for Topping Road. That is it. So if we don't approve that ordinance, we're not doing landscaping on Topping Road. And they're doing the stormwater maintenance and another service. So these industries have been hit hard. So I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate adding language to our contracts to make them stronger. But with custodial and these type of services, they've been hit hard. So we just need to be careful on what we're asking of staff and not get caught rebidding something that we've already taken bids on. That's it.
Appreciate your insight. Thank you.
Yes.
I would seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Have a great evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.